This video focuses on the events that took place during the presidency of Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon was elected as the 37th President of the United States as a result of the election of 1968. Due to the Tet Offensive, a major event of the Vietnam War, Democratic President Lyndon Johnson decided to withdraw from the presidential election. This allowed for Herbert Humphrey to become the next Democratic candidate. Nixon, the competing Republican, promised something he called Vietnamization, in which he would remove U.S. soldiers from training after training the South Vietnamese to be able to fight on their own. This promise was enough for the American people to elect him as president. After being sworn in as president, however, Nixon did not keep that promise as well as he intended. It took him until his second term as president to remove U.S. involvement until March of 1973. In 1971, however, the Pentagon Papers were published, which revealed the secrets the U.S. government had been keeping from the American people during the Vietnam War. This included the story of the My Lai massacre from 1968, where civilians, including women and children, were killed by the U.S. troops. This dramatically increased the credibility gap between the government and the U.S. people. The Pentagon Papers were only a small part of the distrust of the government during Nixon's presidency, which we will talk about more later. One of the successes of Nixon's presidency was that he agreed to the Strategic Arms Limitation Talks, or SALT, with the USSR to reduce tension between the two nations and to stop the construction of nuclear missiles. Nixon's Congress also passed the 26th Amendment, which gave the right to vote to citizens 18 years or older. With the rising increase in the counterculture revolution, many college protests were taking place. On May 4, 1970, an unfortunate shooting occurred at Kent State University. An Ohio National Guard fired off 67 rounds, resulting in the death of 4 students and wounding 9 others. Some of the students had been protesting Nixon's plan to invade Cambodia, while others were simply walking by. The biggest scandal during Nixon's presidency, in fact, in the history of the U.S. presidents, was arguably the Watergate scandal. In 1971, John Mitchell and John Dean organized the Committee for the Re-election of the President, or CREEP. In 1972, after Mitchell became the director of the committee, a break into the Democratic National Committee headquarters located at the Watergate Hotel was approved. The goal of this was to get information on the Democratic campaign strategy for the upcoming presidential election. To this day, we still do not know who issued the operation. In June of 1972, 5 men were arrested at the DNC headquarters, and immediately a cover-up began. The FBI was denied an inquiry by the White House, and false testimonies were given. Despite the Watergate investigation, Nixon was able to win the 1972 election, appealing to what he called the silent majority, the people that did not participate in the publicized protests against the Vietnam War or countercultural movement. In March of 1973, however, the district court judge received a letter from James McCord that stated that witnesses of the Watergate trial had committed perjury and led for more names to get brought forth to the investigation. In July, prosecutor Archibald Cox demanded that Nixon hand over the recordings that he had installed in the White House that would be for him to help write his memoirs. Nixon refused, leading to the Saturday Night Massacre in October, in which 3 high-up officials of the White House lost their jobs because they refused to fire Cox. Eventually, Nixon was forced to give up the tapes, and it was found that there were deleted conversations, leading to an investigation that included Nixon that would go to trial in July of 1974. During the trial, Mitchell, Haldeman, and Ehrlichman were found guilty as the cover-up fell apart and charges were dropped. In August of 1974, Nixon decided to resign under the threat of impeachment. In September of 1974, President Gerald Ford pardoned Nixon in hopes of putting this scandal to an end. It is still unclear to this day whether Nixon knew about the cover-up or not. Nixon's Watergate scandal dramatically changed the U.S. government's relationship with the American people forever.